Yeah, baby. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Always great to be able to connect with you. Same story, right? Yeah, man. It's always fun. Welcome to what I call the best day of the week. And make sure. Let me double check here. I want to make sure that I am not mute because apparently the only time you can keep my mouth shut is when I'm on mute, and this is not the time I think for me to be on mute. But it looks like all is well. It's great to see you guys there, Claire and Sunjoy over on um, Instagram. As always, thank you for joining. It is Wednesday, as I said, the best day of the week. It doesn't matter how we start the week. You know, you get to the middle, man, and you have to get over the hump. And I'm always excited to be able to just spend time every week around about this time, just sharing some thoughts with you. So, recently I was having a conversation with a gentleman, an immigrant like myself, older man. He's retired for many years now. And he got to talking about some of the issues that are taking place in his home country. All right. I don't think we can think of any country in the world where they don't have issues. And so he started talking about those issues in his home country, but then made the comment that, you know what? Um, he doesn't care much about those problems because he is fine, and so they can figure it out. And the thing that struck me most about that comment, I have to say, is that he's not alone. He is not alone with that point of view. There are so many people who have what I call the "I'm okay, Jack" kind of outlook on life, attitude. Right? I am fine. I am fine. So I couldn't give two hoots about the issues that others are having, right? They can go figure it out all on their own. It's what I would describe as a decided lack of empathy, right? Which is what I want to talk about, the importance of being empathetic. Um, Empathy, yeah. What is that? You might wonder. Well, it is really simply the ability to kind of put yourself in the shoes of another person, right? The ancient Indian proverb that says, you have to learn to walk a mile in another man's moccasins, right? So it's really about feeling and understanding the other person's situation in the present moment, their perspective, their emotions, their actions and reactions to what they're experiencing. And then, finding a way to communicate that the fact that you are feeling them, right? You're understanding their situation, which is very different from sympathy. I think even today, some people confuse sympathy and empathy. Sympathy really means that you're looking at a person suffering from the outside and you feel pity for them, right? You're sorry for them. And that I would say is perhaps the biggest difference between sympathy and empathy. Sympathy, you are disconnected. You understand their pain, you see their suffering, you are sorry for them, you pity them, but you're disconnected from the pain, right? Whereas empathy implies that you're feeling the pain with the person. There are, in fact, three different kinds of empathy I discovered. For my friends on the other platforms, let me jump over to my banners here. There are three different kinds of empathy. The first one is what the scientists call cognitive empathy, right? And that is really just the ability to understand how a person feels and even what they might be thinking, right? So cognitive empathy actually makes us better communicators because it helps us to relay the information in a way that really connects, reaches the other person. So the other person gets a sense that, yeah, you know what, this person is really feeling my pain, so to speak. Then there is emotional empathy. Let me hang that up, getting a call. Emotional empathy, which, also known as affective empathy, is really the ability to share the feelings of another person, So when you say, man, I feel your pain, or well, that pain is in my heart as well. That's emotional empathy. That's you. That helps you to really build an emotional connection with others. And then finally, there is compassionate empathy. Compassionate empathy, also known as empathic concern. Let's do there. There we are. Also known as empathic concern, goes beyond this idea of understanding how the person feels, understanding how they're thinking, sharing the feelings with them, feeling their pain. It goes beyond that to drive you, inspire you, move you to take action, to help, and to help in any which way you can. All right. So those quickly are the three kinds of empathy that are out there. The thing is that I've been speaking about this now for the last few weeks, right? The common thread about the fact that we're all different in our own ways, right? Each of us have different perspectives. Of course, we all experience our moods, right? We experience our moods, our pain, our hurt, our joy, our sadness, our exhilaration, our frustration, you name it. We have all these different experiences, and we are events in our lives, and we experience those events. We interpret those events in very different ways. The challenge that is, though, that we sometimes become so limited in only seeing things from our perspective. Yeah, we become very limited in seeing things from our perspective. And when we fail to take a moment to consider, to assess how another person might be feeling, it's very easy for us to make assumptions and to jump to conclusions, right? And we hear of that all the time, right? We hear about racial profiling, for example. But I think we profile people. All of us are guilty of profiling others in a myriad of different ways. However, whatever physical or social construct that we want to draw on, right? It may not be race, it may be ethnicity, it may be neighborhood, it may be age, maybe sexual orientation, right? You name it. And so when we don't take a moment to kind of assess the other person, we jump to this conclusion, and that leads to misunderstandings and bad feelings and conflict. And if you think about just your circles, right? Those people who are in your immediate circles, and how just not taking a moment to understand where they're coming from and to jump to those conclusions does lead to the misunderstandings and the conflict and hurt feelings and low morale and the breakup of relationships and all shapes and forms, from separation to divorce to having really good friends that you never speak to again, that kind of thing, right? When people are not heard, they feel misunderstood. Or if you're not hearing someone, then you are going to misunderstand them, right? And what we find in this world that we live in is that more and more we're living in our bubbles, right? We live in our bubbles, as Claire mentioned earlier, right? We most of us are surrounded by people who look like us, people who vote like us, people who earn like us, work the same kinds of jobs, spend money the same way we spend it, have similar education and worship like us, and you name it, right? And it becomes a situation of us versus them, right? It's native born versus immigrants. It's Christians versus Muslims. It's suburbanites versus inner city. You name it. And what that causes or creates, my friends, is this what I would call an empathy deficit, right? And it has it's at the root, I would say, of many of the biggest problems that we face in society. It's the biggest problems that we face in our personal lives as well. It's because of how homogeneous people's social circles tend to be. And then you add to the fact that we as human beings do hold natural biases. Every single one of us have our natural biases. And so, yeah, people who are smarter than I am, social cognitive scientists, they talk about the fact that our brains may in fact be wired to empathize more with people who look like us. Yeah. Our brains are just seem to be wired that way. There's a recent study that examined brain scans to better understand how the brain works in relation to racial bias and empathy. And what they found was that consistently, people had an increased neural response, right? Their brain in many different parts of their brains, and in very many different types of situation, there was all this activity in their brain once they perceived that a person of their race was experiencing pain, right? They didn't see that kind of reaction from when the subject of the study perceived pain in a person that was not of their race, right? So we all have those biases. So our brains are wired that way. Unfortunately, fortunately, it is what it is. The great thing is, though, while it is true that our brains are wired to empathize with people who look more like us, and it does, as I said earlier, create the conflict and the disharmony, right, among friends and family and neighbors and people in our community and around the world, right? I would argue that empathy is a missing link, man. It's a missing link in our families, in our schools, in our businesses, and our work teams, right? If you see a child acting out and you jump to the conclusion, right, that it's just a misbehaved child. Maybe the child is hungry. Maybe things just are not going well at home, right? Or you see the co-worker just being getting on your last nerve, and maybe that person's spouse has been diagnosed with a terminal illness. You don't know. In fact, I Stephen Covey's book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, I'm pretty sure that's where I read it. He spoke about being on the train in the New York City subway, and this gentleman had come on the train with 2 or 3 kids. And the kids were rowdy. They were just disruptive, noisy, banging around and just being, disruptive. And the gentleman just kind of sat there in oblivion, just not paying attention to the children. And Stephen said, he says, "Sir, your children are being disruptive. You might want to calm them down." And the guy kind of came back to present moment and go, "Yeah, I guess I should. They were just coming from the hospital. They just lost their mother. Their mother just died," right? Put things into perspective for you, right? I can just imagine, and I think Stephen did say that, like, in that moment, he just felt like this big. And that's what happens when, again, we jump to conclusions. So it's really important to develop empathy. It's such a crucial ingredient for establishing relationships and behaving compassionately, right? It involves experiencing another person's point of view, and rather than just our own, as it were, right? It helps us to cooperate with others, build friendships, make moral decisions, intervene when we see others being taken advantage of. I mean, if you're watching the news here, certainly in the US, you'll see so many unfortunate reports of Asians being attacked because of the China flu or virus or whatever they want to call it. And it sickens me, it angers me that people would do that. And I'm even more saddened by the fact that there have been instances where someone is being attacked and people just stand there and they watch, right? It's kind of a weird dynamic in which we live. We see all these things that are happening out out in the world, people being taken advantage of. And what are people doing? They whip out their cell phones and they they take a picture, they take a video, and while I guess it's important to do that, um, the thing that saddens me is that you, in all of those cases, you never see somebody jumping in to help. Where is the empathy, man? Where's the empathy? That's a question, right? So that's the missing link. No, talking about link. Although we are wired to show empathy for people who look more like us, the great news is that you can develop empathy. Empathy is a skill as well, and we know what skills are, right? They're things you learn and you practice and you develop them. So let's talk about how you do that. I'm going to share 3 ideas with you on how you can develop empathy. If I can see my thing here. So number one, be curious. Be curious. You have to be curious. Curiosity expands our empathy when we talk to people outside of our social or usual social circles. So it kind of means that you have to venture out of your usual social circles. Travel a little bit, man. Some of the most enlightened people, some of the most tolerant, understanding people that I have met are people who have traveled, because they get to go see firsthand how other people live, understand their struggles and their issues. So do that when you encounter the lives and the worldviews of people that are very different from you. You begin to be able to see things through their perspective. So that's number one. Be curious. Number two, listen up here. Right. Challenge your biases, right? I just spoke about the fact that we all have our biases, right? We have to learn to challenge our biases. We have assumptions about others. We use the collective labels, as I said earlier, the inner city youths or the ghetto rats or Muslim fundamentalist or transgender or gay, or you name it. We have all those preconceived notions about how or what or how someone is like or how they will behave, and we have to do the hard work, the introspective work of uncovering our own hidden biases that interfere with our ability to see the other person as human. I think that's it. That's a big part of the issue, right? When you cannot show empathy, or it's really difficult, if not impossible, to show empathy or to be empathetic towards someone who you don't see as human, equally as human as you are, right? So challenge those biases then. And then number 3, that's how we have 3 things. It's actually 4. Actively listen. Actively listen. So if you are curious, if you are challenging your biases, right? You get out of your social circles and you're really getting to understand how people are. You find that, as I said earlier, you start walking in their shoes, right? You put yourself in their shoes. There's an author, I can't remember his name now, I apologize for that. But the dude, decided to become homeless, let's say, and lived on the streets and begged, and really understood how homeless people lived and realized that they were all not vagrants, and ended up writing a really popular book about the experience, right? He put himself in their shoes. And so when you're getting out there, being curious and challenging your bias and putting yourself in other people's shoes, one of the things you absolutely need to do, which is number 3, is to actively listen. If you get out there and you're listening to other people and their experiences, getting into their world, then you'll be able to start developing empathy. You'll be able to start seeing the humanity in them as well. I think when we treat people the way we do, that many of the things that you see in the media right now is because we fail to see the humanity in the other person. And when you do that, man, you really debase them. And quite frankly, we debase ourselves as well. In the same way that it's impossible to encourage and help someone without encouraging and helping ourselves in the same breath, it's impossible to debase another human being without at the same time debasing ourselves, right? So yeah, empathy, may that be our watchword as we move forward. I think there's, as I said earlier, a empathy deficit. We just don't seem to care too much about learning about understanding how other people live, because we're in our own bubbles, and we're fine, because it is such a selfish, in my opinion, way in which to live life. Hey, I'm fine. Who cares what happens to you? No, I don't think that is reflective of our better angels, let's say. So I challenge you to, if you are one of those people who are like, hey, I'm good over here, so I don't really care about the others, I challenge you to examine those that point of view. The way for all of us to live harmoniously is for us to accept that there are people who look and live differently from us, who deserve to be treated just as well as us. So those are the thoughts I wanted to share with you this week, my friends. Thank you so much, as always, for joining. Looking forward to seeing you next week. Chew on these things, of course, and bring a friend next week, man. Let's chew the fat again. All right. Encourage you. I want to invite you to jump over to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/keeponpushing_always. Lots of great content there, all free. Just come over. It only costs you the time it takes you to click and subscribe and like and leave a comment. All right. Until we connect next week, you know what you should do. Keep on pushing.